Before we begin tonight's journey, I want to gently invite you into something. If you feel drawn to Edgar Cayce's teachings, if you love exploring the hidden side of Jesus' life and the deeper purpose of your own soul, please take a moment to subscribe to the Edgar Cayce Files. Your support truly helps this channel reach other seekers who are searching for the same light. Thank you. And now let's step into the mystery. For nearly 2,000 years, there has been a gap in the story of Jesus that has puzzled believers, scholars, and mystics alike. We see him as a gifted 12-year-old in the temple, astonishing the elders with his understanding. And then the record falls silent. The next time we see him, he is a fully awakened teacher at the Jordan River, ready to begin a ministry that will change the world. What happened in between? 18 silent years. No stories, no sermons, no miracles recorded, just silence. But silence does not mean nothing. In the Cayce readings, those 18 years are anything but empty. They are a time of pilgrimage, initiation, remembrance, and profound inner work. A time when Jesus traveled to lands he had known in other lifetimes, met teachers he had walked with before, and reclaimed spiritual knowledge that had been woven into his soul across the ages. Cayce said something simple, almost casual, but incredibly powerful, that during those missing years he journeyed to those lands where he had been before. In that one line, Cayce quietly affirms reincarnation and reveals the real purpose of these travels. Jesus was not wandering to find himself. He was returning to places and schools of wisdom where his soul already carried a history. He was remembering. If you feel something stir inside you as you hear this, if part of you thinks, of course he did, as if you're recalling an old story you once knew, that may not be an accident. Cayce would say your soul is recognizing truth it has carried for a very long time. According to the readings, the first of those great journeys took him back to Egypt. Egypt, in Cayce's view, was not just a land of pyramids and pharaohs, but a spiritual laboratory. Long before Jesus' lifetime, his soul had served there as a priest, working with advanced healing and initiatory rituals designed to lift human consciousness. Those temples were not simply historical ruins. They were stages in a much older story, a story his soul had helped build. When Jesus returned to Egypt during the hidden years, he was not stepping into foreign territory. He was walking back into a school he had already attended, picking up where he had left off. Cayce describes two major centers of training, places later remembered as the Temple Beautiful and the Temple of the Sun. The names themselves sound poetic, but each represented a precise kind of work. In what Cayce called the Temple Beautiful, the focus was on the heart, not just emotions, but the deep inner motives that shape our lives. Here, Jesus would have gone through disciplines and exercises that purified desire, softened pride, and strengthened compassion. This was not about punishing the self or creating shame. It was about clearing away the noise so that love could flow more freely. Imagine a school where the curriculum is learning how to love without fear, to forgive without holding back, to stand in courage without bitterness, and to remain gentle without becoming weak. According to Cayce, that is the kind of work done in these initiations. Jesus did not undergo them because he was impure, but because he was fulfilling a pattern every soul must one day walk if it is to fully remember its origin in God. The Temple of the Sun, by contrast, trained the mind, not in the sense of memorizing facts, but in learning how thought itself shapes reality. Here the lessons would have centered on focus, intention, and the power of belief. This is where the seeds were sown for teachings we later hear in the Gospels, that as a person thinks in their heart, so they become, that faith opens the door to healing, that the mind aligned with spirit can move mountains of fear and limitation. Alongside this inner training, Jesus also deepened his understanding of healing. Cayce speaks of methods using color, sound, vibration, oils, herbs, and the subtle currents of life force that move through the body. The idea that spirit, mind, and body are three expressions of one reality was not an abstract theory. It was a living practice. When Jesus later laid his hands on the sick or spoke peace to a troubled mind, he was drawing on more than one lifetime's worth of work in these schools. The priests and teachers in Egypt, according to Cayce, recognized him not merely because of prophecies they had preserved, but because of the light and authority in his soul. They knew the pattern they had been preparing for was standing before them. Egypt, in those hidden years, was less a classroom and more a reunion. From Egypt, the path in the Cayce readings leads northeast into the land of the Magi, Persia. The Magi are often reduced in popular imagination to three exotic figures following a star. But Cayce paints a richer picture. They were part of a brotherhood dedicated to understanding the rhythms of the stars, the cycles of time, and the ways divine intention is echoed in the movements of the heavens. Their work blended mathematics, astronomy, healing, and prophecy into a single tapestry. When Jesus arrived among them as a young man, he was not a curiosity. He was the fulfillment of something they had guarded for generations. Cayce suggests that the same spiritual current that led the Magi to his infant form now welcomed him back as a maturing soul, seeking alignment with his mission. In Persia, he studied how divine law expresses itself through patterns, seasons, planetary movements, and long cycles of spiritual awakening. This did not turn him into an astrologer in the narrow fortune-telling sense, but it deepened his sensitivity to timing. When to speak and when to remain silent, when to act and when to wait. When a moment was ripe for healing, or teaching, or confrontation, or withdrawal. This phase of his training also shaped his way of teaching. Cayce hints that in Persia, Jesus refined the art of speaking in parables, simple stories carrying multiple layers of meaning. A tale about a farmer and some seeds, a father and two sons, a traveler on a dangerous road. On the surface, anyone could understand them, but beneath the surface, deeper truths waited for those with ears to hear. Persia strengthened his ability to communicate across levels of consciousness, to speak in a way that would nourish a peasant and challenge a philosopher in the same breath. It also broadened his understanding of natural remedies and the compassionate use of herbs, oils, and preparations to comfort the body. Before there were miracles, there was simple care. From Persia, the road turns east again, following the ancient trade routes we now call the Silk Road. Here, caravans moved slowly through deserts and mountains, carrying spices, fabrics, stories, and ideas between distant cultures. It is not hard to imagine Jesus traveling in such company. One more figure among merchants, travelers, and wandering teachers. To the casual observer, he would have looked ordinary. Cayce's readings do not give us a day-by-day diary of this journey, but they do give broad strokes. That he moved through lands where Eastern and Western thought mingled, where mystics and traders shared campfires, and where the boundaries between religions were softer than we might imagine today. Along the way, he would have met seekers, skeptics, devotees, and doubters, people of every kind, speaking different languages, holding different beliefs, each carrying their own wounds and hopes. This stretch of the journey matters, even if the readings describe it briefly, because it humanizes the path. Not every step took place in a temple. Much of spiritual growth happens on dusty roads, in ordinary conversations, in the quiet interior choices we make when no one is watching. On these roads, Jesus would have seen firsthand how universal the human heart is, how every culture struggles with fear, loss, love, and longing for something greater. Eventually, the road leads into India. In India, Jesus encountered teachers whose entire lives were organized around one core recognition, that all life is rooted in one divine reality. Some called it the law of one. Others expressed it through different names and images. But the essence was the same. Beneath every form, every person, every path, there is one source, and that source is love. Cayce describes Jesus living among communities that practiced non-violence not as a rule imposed from above, but as a natural outflow of recognizing that harming another is, at some level, harming oneself. Here he saw what it looks like when an entire spiritual path revolves around compassion, inner stillness, and the continuous remembrance of the divine presence. This had a direct impact on his later teachings. When he said, "Blessed are the peacemakers," or "Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you," he was not suggesting something naive or impossible. He was drawing from ways of life he had witnessed firsthand, absorbing their wisdom and integrating it with the prophetic tradition he carried from Israel and the initiatory wisdom of Egypt and Persia. In India, he also deepened his understanding of the relationship between body, breath, and spirit. Cayce hints at practices involving controlled breathing, silent meditation, and the alignment of inner spiritual centers, what some traditions later called chakras. The idea that the body is a living temple, that certain points along the spine and in the head respond to prayer, sound, and intention, was not foreign to him. These practices did not make him Eastern or Western. They made him whole. They showed him that the truths he carried were not the property of any one culture. Truth was older than any single religion. Some accounts, woven into the fabric of later spiritual stories, speak of monasteries tucked in remote valleys, of teachers whose names are forgotten, of small communities where a wandering young teacher from the West would have been welcomed, listened to, and quietly tested. While Cayce does not endorse every legend that grew up around Jesus in the East, his readings affirm the core pattern, that Jesus lived among such people, learned from them, and left a lasting impression. It is not difficult to imagine younger seekers in those communities sensing something different about him, his calm, his authority, the way he listened, the way his presence alone seemed to change the atmosphere in a room. Perhaps they did not know his name, perhaps they never knew how his story would unfold. But for a time, he was simply the young teacher from the West, who spoke of a God who was both intimately near and unimaginably vast, a God who knew each soul personally. India, in the Cayce perspective, was the great expansion, a place where Jesus fully grasped the universality of his mission. He saw that God had never abandoned any culture, that revelation had been blooming in different soils across the earth, and that his work would be to draw all of that into a new pattern, a living example of divine love walking in human form. From India, the path in the readings turns north into higher elevations and colder winds. Some streams of tradition suggest that Jesus passed through regions that touched the fringes of Tibet or Himalayan cultures, where solitude and silence were considered teachers in their own right. Whether for months or longer, he would have had time alone, time away from crowds and conversation, time to sit with what he had seen and heard. Silence leaves us with ourselves. For most of us, that can be uncomfortable. Old fears rise up. Unfinished grief returns. Hopes and doubts surface together. For Jesus, those solitary periods were not about escaping the world, but about listening more deeply to the inner voice of the Father. Having gathered wisdom from so many places, he now had to let it settle, let it burn away whatever was not essential, and allow his own unique calling to crystallize. Cayce speaks less directly about this segment, but the pattern is clear. Intense learning is followed by integration, and integration is often followed by a final series of tests. Those tests, according to Cayce, unfolded in the northern lands we think of today as Mongolia and surrounding regions. Here there were no great temples, no organized schools of mystical practice waiting for him. There were families, herders, traders, people living close to the earth in small communities, facing the harshness of climate and the demands of survival. Among them, Jesus was not honored as a prodigy, not recognized as a prophesied Messiah, not treated as special. He was just another man willing to work, to help, to share what he had. And that, Cayce says, is exactly what he needed. In Egypt, he encountered recognition. In Persia, he encountered expectation. In India, he encountered reverence. But in these northern lands, he encountered ordinariness. He lived as one of them. He shared their food and their struggles. He helped care for animals, hauled water, repaired what was broken, listened to their stories, and offered quiet kindness in return. If he spoke of God, it would not have been in grand sermons, but in simple words that met people where they were. This was the final humbling, not in the sense of humiliation, but in the sense of becoming truly human, fully identifying with the daily life of ordinary souls, with no titles, no robes, no recognition. Cayce suggests that this period helped strip away anything in him that might still cling to fame, power, or being set apart. Love became the only reason to act when he would later say, "Whoever would be greatest among you must be the servant of all." He was not quoting an abstract spiritual principle. He was speaking from the memory of years spent in communities where service and survival were bound together, where the true leaders were the ones who quietly carried the heaviest loads. At last, after years of travel, study, silence, and service, Jesus turned his steps back toward the land of his birth. He did not return as the boy who had astonished teachers in the temple. He returned as a soul who had walked the great circles of wisdom on this earth. Egypt's initiations, Persia's star law, India's compassion, the northern land's humility, and the quieting power of solitude. All of it now lived within him, not as separate teachings, but as facets of a single reality, God's love. When he approached the Jordan River to be baptized by John, he knew what lay ahead. He knew that his public life would be brief and intense. He knew there would be opposition, misunderstanding, and pain. He also knew that there would be healings, liberations, and moments when heaven seemed to open for those who were ready. Cayce said very simply that he had become the pattern for every soul. That does not mean we are expected to duplicate his external life. It means the inner journey he walked is a map of our own. The need to remember who we really are, to reclaim wisdom from our own past, to pass through disciplines of heart and mind, to learn compassion, to serve without recognition, and finally to awaken to the divine presence within us. The hidden years of Jesus are not a side note. They are a revelation of how seriously heaven takes preparation, long before the crowds, long before the miracles, long before the cross. There were years of quiet work, unseen by history, but essential to it. And perhaps they whisper something to you as well. Maybe you have had seasons of your life that felt like a gap in your own story. Years where nothing seemed to be happening on the surface, where you felt dismissed, or anonymous, or quietly forgotten. From the soul's perspective, those may have been your own hidden years. Times when the deepest changes were taking root beneath the soil. If this journey through Cayce's vision of Jesus's hidden years stirs something in you, if you feel a strange mixture of peace and longing as you listen, it may be your own soul remembering that you too have walked long roads in many lands, that you too have known temples and deserts, teachers and tests, that your life now is part of a much greater story. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are not starting from zero. The same divine presence that guided Jesus across those ancient paths is still at work, quietly, patiently, in the hidden places of your own heart. If this journey resonated with you, if it stirred something deep and familiar, then stay close. There is so much more waiting for you here. More from the Cayce readings, more about Jesus, more about the soul, reincarnation, and the hidden laws shaping your life right now. So take a moment and subscribe to the Edgar Cayce Files. Don't miss what's coming next. Walk this path with us, step by step, as we uncover the forgotten teachings, the untold stories, and the deeper purpose behind your journey. Because your presence here matters, your light matters, and in ways you may not yet see, your own hidden years are preparing you for something beautiful. If this journey resonated with you, if it awakened something deep, something ancient, then stay close, because what's coming next is powerful. There is so much more in the Cayce readings about Jesus, the soul, reincarnation, and the hidden laws shaping your life right now. So take a moment and subscribe to the Edgar Cayce Files here on Mystic Podcast Cruise. Don't miss what's ahead. Walk this path with us, step by step, as we uncover the forgotten teachings, the untold stories, and the deeper purpose behind your own journey. Your presence here matters. Your light matters. And in ways you may not yet see, your own hidden years are preparing you for something beautiful.